Hi everyone, my name is John. Welcome back to my channel. I wanted to talk about a book today that I recently finished a few weeks ago as a part of an event I'm co-hosting called Historathon. It's ongoing throughout the year, and for the second quarter of the year we read nonfiction history related literature written in or about the years 500 to 1500 AD. And I've had this book on my shelf for probably 15 years, maybe. Too long to have been unread. It is from one of the. I love this label. It is apparently an imprint from Cambridge University Press. It's called Canto, and they reprint what they think are important seminal books. I don't know who originally printed this. It might have been someone else, but this is what the spines look like. You can see Canto there, Cambridge University Press. This is The Discarded Image, an introduction, I'll word on that in a second, to medieval and Renaissance literature by C.S. Lewis. And this was posthumously published in 1964, a year after C.S. Lewis died. He died actually on the same day that both JFK and Aldous Huxley did. So his death didn't get a lot of publicity. But this is a really, really wonderful book, even if its title is far from accurate. So anyone who goes into the book expecting an introduction to medieval and Renaissance literature is not really going to get that. You won't learn about what the Canterbury Tales or Sir Gawain and the Green Knight are about. Ironically, for an introduction, Lewis mostly assumes you're passingly familiar, at least, with the so-called great books of the years around 500 to 1500 AD. Instead, he builds what he calls a comprehensive synthetic model of the universe that will help you kind of inhabit the medieval mind, the medieval imagination, from assumptions about cosmology to science, history, the human body, psychology, the liberal arts, education, and quite a bit more. And to do this, he doesn't go to the scientific texts of the time. So he's not trying to give you a history of science presentation. But what he's doing is gleaning everything he can from the what I'm calling the imaginative literature. So, not science, the poetry, for example. And that's just one example. What will make the book a little difficult for some people, I think, for contemporary readers, is that much of Lewis's material comes from a lifetime immersion of the literature of the period. The usual suspects, people like Augustine and Aquinas and Lucan and Apuleius and Boethius, they all make appearances, but you have just as many insights from people that aren't really read by anyone, maybe except for classicists. Okay, so you also have people like Statius and Claudian and Chalcidius and Pseudo-Dionysius. And sorry for all the name dropping, but I just want to sort of convey an idea of the broad level of names that you'll encounter if you choose to read the book, and how a lot of them probably won't be familiar to most people. But he does explain what he's sort of dissecting as he goes along, so he doesn't assume you are coldly familiar with these people. He quotes them and gives text blocks, and then tries to sort of pick apart what they think according to what they've written. That's sort of the general MO of the book. It's still very much worth the effort, despite the fact that you might not be familiar with all the authors. Just know that you'll have to hand yourself over to Lewis's literary interpretations and inferences, which isn't a big ask when the author in question was, like I said, a medievalist himself, like Lewis was. To unpack the medieval mind, Lewis suggests that we remember two things. The intense bookishness of the intellectual life especially of this period, and their extraordinary talent for categorization, organization, and classification. There is no contradiction a medieval scholar couldn't reconcile if he wished to. Um, and I only say he because the vast majority of them were actually men. Although, of course, there are exceptions. Their intense bookishness led them to treat their ancient forebears with a little bit too much credulity. Surely one of the reasons why Aristotle, for example, remained one of the go-to authors for many subjects even 2 millennia after his death. They didn't really criticize him or question him. They just took him as holy writ, almost. Lewis argues that the same credulity also allowed for a seamless blending of Christian and pagan influence, which we recognize today as uniquely medieval. The tidy world building that medievals engaged in connected every aspect of their hierarchical world into a kind of great chain of being. I think that's Arthur Lovejoy's phrase, if I'm not mistaken, with everything reflecting the divine unity of God himself, redounding from the 9 choirs of angels and eventually humans down to animals. Each have their own unique place, from the earth to the final sphere, the primum mobile, which God alone can touch and imparts all motion to the other spheres below it. The medieval model postulates 4 substances: cold, hot, moist, and dry, the combinations of which give us words that we still use today to describe human dispositions, emotions, like sanguine, choleric, phlegmatic, melancholic, etc. There is an epilogue at the end of Lewis's book that is a literary and cultural parallel to Thomas Kuhn's book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, where Lewis basically says that the medieval image that he describes has since been discarded, the discarded image, for a more modern one, and that the modern one will eventually, in its own turn, be displaced as well. So in much the same way that Einstein's idea of gravity replaced Newton's at the beginning of the 20th century, in the light of new evidence, the prevailing ideas that we use to make sense of our world slowly change with cultural norms and values. And what Lewis, I think, is trying to do in this book is really crystallize at a certain time period. Yes, it's a very long time period, but those core ideas fundamental to, I know he says Renaissance in the subtitle, but it's mostly medieval. It's mostly medieval literature. And to kind of best understand what those ideas were all about and how medieval people thought about the world in a very sort of fundamental way. The contemporary world, even the worldview of contemporary religious people, is very, very secular. The freedom of conscience and a wall of separation between church and state are mostly taken for granted, at least in the United States, in theory, but these would have been wildly foreign concepts to most people during the medieval and Renaissance periods. While the greatest medieval and Renaissance literature will always appeal to our imaginations, I think The Discarded Image is a short book that goes a really long way in trying to recreate the complex intellectual architecture that helps shape that literature. So we can not just appreciate it as a form of creativity, as a form of aesthetic, a certain kind of beauty, but we can also come to appreciate the ideas that they were talking about as well. So it's a wonderful complement to just being able to recognize a beautiful literary form, because being able to understand the world as they saw it as best we can, I think, is a really important idea, obviously, of being able to read the work for all it's worth. And because it does that, it bridges a really important gap to an earlier time that can seem so utterly different from our own. So read it not as an introduction, like I said, it's not an introduction, but as a sort of companion piece to everyone from Cicero to Boccaccio. And it's sure to constantly reveal new facets and new nuances to the literature we already love, but I think that C.S. Lewis can help us appreciate anew. So, some thoughts on C.S. Lewis's last book, The Discarded Image, an introduction. It's not an introduction to medieval and Renaissance literature. I will see you soon with another video. Bye.